All right, so welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today we are going to be cracking open. All right, so welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today we are going to be cracking open 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. And you're looking for those like core concepts, right? The Peterson 101 without, having to read the whole thing. Hopefully we find some unexpected connections along the way.
Oh, Peterson is all about those surprising links. He's got psychology in there, history, biology. He even brings lobsters into the mix.
Lobsters. Okay, I am intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
But let's start with the history part. I've heard that Peterson, he draws a lot from 20th century totalitarian regimes.
Yes, that's right. He uses those regimes, especially the horrors that they inflicted, to kind of challenge this idea that happiness is the end-all, be-all of life.
Okay, so it's not all about chasing rainbows and butterflies then.
Not quite. Peterson, he argues that, those regimes, they showed that a simplistic pursuit of happiness. It leaves you totally unprepared for the suffering that inevitably comes with, being human. He quotes Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who had firsthand experience with the Soviet gulags. He says that, and this is a quote, "Any ideology that claims humans are made for happiness is done in by the first blow of the work assigner's cudgel."
Wow, that's a powerful image for sure. So if happiness isn't the goal, then what is?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, and Peterson's answer, it gets pretty complex, but one key piece is understanding these dominance hierarchies, which brings us back to those lobsters.
Okay, all right, lay it on me. How do lobsters fit into all of this?
Well, Peterson, he highlights that lobsters and humans actually share a similar neurological response to these dominance hierarchies, and it's all tied to serotonin levels.
Serotonin, like the happy chemical.
Exactly. And both lobsters and humans, they experience these lower serotonin levels when they're lower in that social pecking order. And, low serotonin, it makes you more susceptible to stress, to anxiety, even physical problems.
So where we stand socially really has a real impact on our well-being. It's not just, in our heads, it's biological.
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting. So if we're wired for these hierarchies, does that mean we're all just stuck in our social roles?
I would really hope not.
Peterson, he says that, while we need to recognize these hierarchies exist, we also need to be aware of how we can sabotage ourselves.
Sabotage ourselves? In what way?
Well, he gives this example that people are often better at giving their pets medication than taking it themselves. And it really highlights this tendency we have to act against our own best interests.
That's so true, though. It's we have this blind faith in our own goodness, and that leaves us vulnerable.
Yeah, Peterson, he isn't saying we're all inherently bad, but he does think we need to reevaluate some of our naive beliefs and accept that, not everyone plays by the same rules of kindness and fairness.
So it's about developing a healthy amount of self-protection, knowing how to navigate a world where not everyone has, good intentions.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of Peterson's most famous pieces of advice, and it's to stand up straight.
Wait, literally, good posture.
Yeah, yes, but it goes beyond that, just physical posture. Peterson is talking about projecting this confidence and taking ownership of your life.
So there's a deeper meaning behind standing up straight. How does that connect to this self-protection then?
Well, good posture can actually create this feedback loop. When you stand tall, you tend to feel more confident, and then that changes how other people, how they perceive you and treat you. It's not just about appearances. It's about taking control, owning your space in the world.
That is really fascinating, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you project outwardly can impact how you feel inwardly.
Right. And this kind of ties into another one of Peterson's rules, and it's about choosing your tribe wisely. He believes that surrounding yourself with people who support you and challenge you to grow is absolutely crucial.
It makes sense. The people we spend our time with can either lift us up or they can drag us down.
He even poses this really interesting question, and it's, would you recommend your friends to your family? Why or why not? It really makes you think about the quality of your relationships.
Yeah, that is a good one. It forces you to think critically about who you choose to let into your inner circle.
And Peterson emphasizes that choosing good relationships, it's not selfish. It's actually essential for a good life. You need people who will encourage you to become the best version of yourself.
It's like tending a garden, right? You want to nurture those relationships that help you thrive. But with all this talk about hierarchies and competition, it's so easy to get caught in that comparison trap. especially in today's world.
Absolutely. And Peterson offers like an interesting perspective on this. He suggests comparing yourself not to other people, but to who you were yesterday.
So instead of focusing on how we measure up to others, we should look at our own, progress.
Exactly. It's a simple shift in mindset, but it's so powerful. Instead of feeling inadequate next to someone else's achievements, you're celebrating your own growth. It's about acknowledging how far you've come, even if it's just a small step from yesterday.
That's a great way to reframe things. It takes the focus off of that external validation and it puts it back on your own, personal development.
And speaking of internal battles, Peterson talks a lot about this internal critic, that voice inside our heads that loves to just point out all our flaws.
Oh, I know that voice all too well.
Yeah. And Peterson, he challenges us to really examine that voice. Is it offering genuine wisdom, or is it just a source of negativity? Is it holding us back from reaching our full potential?
That is a great question. How do we tell the difference between helpful criticism and just plain negativity?
It's not always easy, but Peterson suggests that a good starting point is to look at whether or not the criticism, is it aligned with your values? If it's not, then it's probably coming from a place of fear or insecurity.
So it's about aligning our actions with our values, even when that inner critic is screaming at us to do otherwise.
Precisely. It's about choosing to act in ways that resonate with our deepest sense of what's right and good, even if it's uncomfortable or challenging. And that's where discipline and a sense of tradition can come in handy.
Wait, tradition? I thought Peterson was all about questioning authority and forging your own path.
He is, but he also recognizes the value of tradition, especially when it comes to developing character and navigating, life's complexities.
So it's not about blind obedience, but about recognizing the wisdom that's been passed down through generations.
Right. Even if we don't agree with every aspect of tradition, it can still provide a framework for living a good life. It's like having a map, You might not follow every turn exactly, but having a general sense of direction can help you avoid getting lost in the wilderness.
So tradition can be a compass, but it doesn't have to dictate every step that we take. It sounds like Peterson is all about finding that balance between individual freedom and the wisdom of the past.
Exactly. And that balance is something he explores in a lot of his work, particularly when he talks about the darker aspects of human nature.
I've heard he doesn't shy away from discussing those darker aspects.
That's right. He delves into our capacity for, evil, even referencing figures like Cain, Genghis Khan, and modern-day mass murderers.
Wow, there were some heavy hitters. Why does he choose to focus on such dark topics?
He connects it to the struggle for meaning, pointing to Tolstoy's observation that the absurdity of life, it can lead not only to suicide, but even to murder-suicide, like a sort of protest against existence itself.
Sounds pretty bleak.
It can be, but Peterson argues that we can't truly understand good without, understanding evil. They exist in relation to each other. By confronting those darker aspects, we can actually better appreciate the light.
So it's about facing that shadow side of human nature, not pretending it doesn't exist.
Exactly. And this leads us to another key theme in Peterson's work, and it's the power of story and sacrifice.
I'm curious to hear how he ties those two together.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Jordan Peterson.
We're talking about this power of story and sacrifice. I mean, those seem like pretty heavy concepts. How does Peterson approach them?
He sees them as deeply intertwined. Peterson views sacrifice not just as, giving things up, but as a fundamental aspect of human existence, a principle woven into our very being. He points to ancient stories like the binding of Isaac or the crucifixion of Christ as these symbolic representations of this deep psychological truth.
So it's more than just deprivation then?
Absolutely. It's about making choices that prioritize the long-term good, even if it means, enduring hardship in the present, delaying gratification, making those difficult choices for the sake of something greater down the line.
Like investing in the future, putting in the work now for a payoff later.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that real meaning. It often emerges from those difficult choices, shouldering responsibility, acting in accordance with our values.
Makes sense.
Oh.
We often grow the most when we are pushed outside our comfort zones. And Peterson's really emphasizing that importance of aligning our actions with our values. How do we even know what our values are?
Well, that's where honest self-reflection comes in. And that's another key theme in Peterson's work.
Yeah.
The importance of truth.
I remember we touched on that earlier. He's not just talking about being honest with others, is he?
Right. It goes deeper than that. He's talking about being radically honest with ourselves, confronting those uncomfortable truths about our own lives, about our motivations, and even about our shortcomings.
It sounds pretty intense. Why is that level of honesty so crucial?
Because it's in that honest self-reflection that we can begin to make real change. We can strip away all those layers of self-deception and finally see ourselves clearly, even those parts we would rather keep hidden. And only then can we truly align our actions with our values and start living authentically.
So it's about more than just feeling good. It's about living in alignment with what we believe is right, even when it's difficult.
Exactly. And that leads us to Peterson's concept of aiming at the highest good. It might sound kind of lofty, but it boils down to striving for a life that transcends mere comfort and pleasure. It's about asking ourselves, what is the most meaningful way that I can contribute to the world?
So it's about finding a purpose bigger than ourselves.
You could say that. It's about pushing beyond complacency, beyond the pursuit of just, material gain, and asking what truly resonates with my deepest sense of purpose, and then pursuing that with passion and integrity.
Sounds like a lifelong journey.
It is, and that's what makes it so compelling. There's always more to learn, more to experience, more to contribute. But those contributions, they can take many forms. For some, it might be raising a family. For others, it might be creating art or building a business or even just being a kind and compassionate presence in the lives of those around you.
So there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It's about finding what gives your life meaning and purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the power of narrative. Peterson, he emphasizes that we are storytelling creatures. We make sense of the world, of our experiences, even of our own identities through the stories that we tell. We weave together events and emotions and interpretations to try to create this coherent picture of our lives.
So the stories that we tell ourselves, they actually shape how we see the world.
Absolutely. And Peterson encourages us to be mindful of those stories. Are they serving us, helping us grow? Are they aligned with the person we want to become? If not, we have the power to, rewrite the narrative.
So we're not just these passive characters in our own stories. We have the power to change the script.
Exactly. It's a process of ongoing self-reflection, self-creation. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to face those uncomfortable truths about ourselves. And this kind of ties back to that crucial element of truth-telling. Remember, Peterson believes that honesty is the foundation of a meaningful life.
But isn't there a difference between being honest and being, hurtful?
Sometimes the truth can be pretty harsh.
Oh, there's definitely a balance to be struck.
Yeah.
But Peterson argues that even when the truth is, painful or inconvenient, confronting it is ultimately the path to freedom and growth. He uses his own life as an example. He describes a time when he realized he was using language more to manipulate than to communicate authentically.
Well, he says that decision, it changed his life. It allowed him to connect with people on this deeper level, and to navigate uncertainty with more clarity and confidence. It opened up new possibilities he hadn't even imagined before.
That's really inspiring. It shows how powerful honesty can be, even if it's initially scary. So how can we apply this in our own lives? How can we become more truthful with ourselves and others?
Well, it starts with becoming aware of our own patterns of deception, both big and small. What stories are we telling ourselves that might not even be true? What are we avoiding facing? And then it's about making these small, conscious choices to start being more truthful, both in our words and in our actions. It might be something as simple as admitting a mistake, or setting a boundary in a relationship.
So it's about taking those small steps towards authenticity,
Yeah.
even if it feels uncomfortable at first.
Exactly. And those small steps can lead to bigger changes over time. It's like building a muscle, right? The more we practice honesty, the easier it becomes. And the more we align our actions with our values, the more fulfilling our lives will be.
It sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
But also really rewarding.
It is, but it's worth it. And that leads us to another area where Peterson, he emphasizes clarity and precision, and that is language. He argues that vague or imprecise language can actually hinder our ability to solve problems and understand the world around us.
I'm curious to hear more about that. So we were talking about language and how it can really impact our understanding of the world. Where does Peterson go with this?
Well, you see, he argues that language is this powerful tool, right? And it can be used to both illuminate and obscure the truth. He believes that, using vague or imprecise language, it can hinder our ability to solve problems and understand the world around us.
And so how does that play out in real life?
He uses this analogy of a computer, when we look at a laptop, for example, we see a single object, but beneath that sleek exterior, there's this vast network of components and code and all these interconnected systems, right? What we perceive as this simple thing is actually just one part of a much larger, more complex reality.
That's a great analogy. We often take things at face value without considering all the underlying complexities.
Exactly. And Peterson suggests that this applies to, our lives as well. We get caught up in our own limited perspectives, forgetting how interconnected we are to the world around us, to history, to culture, to this vast web of human relationships.
Yeah, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture when we're so focused on our own, like, day-to-day concerns.
He believes that using language more precisely can help us break out of those limited perspectives, help us see the connections, the patterns, the underlying structures that shape our world.
So it's about using language as a tool for deeper understanding, not just for surface-level communication.
Right. It's like sharpening a knife. The more precise the blade, the more effectively you can use it. And this leads us to another crucial element of communication, and it's the art of dialogue and deep listening.
Yeah, we've touched on this a bit before, but I'm always eager to learn more about, effective communication. What makes dialogue so important?
Well, Peterson believes that genuine dialogue, where participants are truly listening to understand rather than just waiting to, respond or refute, it's essential for growth and connection. He's a big advocate of the Rogerian method of listening, where you restate the speaker's ideas and feelings to their satisfaction before offering your own response.
That sounds like it would take a lot of patience and effort, but I can see how it would foster, empathy and understanding.
It's a game changer, especially in those emotionally charged conversations where it's easy to get triggered and defensive. It creates space for genuine connection, even in the midst of disagreement. It's like building a bridge instead of a wall.
So it's about recognizing that even when we disagree, there's value in understanding where the other person's coming from. It's about finding common ground rather than just trying to, win an argument.
Exactly, and this ties back to Peterson's framework of chaos and order, which we discussed earlier. He sees life as this constant dance between these two forces. Chaos represents the unknown, the unpredictable, the potential for, both good and evil. Order represents structure, stability, and meaning.
And he argues that we need both of those things to thrive.
Right. Too much chaos leads to anxiety and disintegration, while too much order leads to stagnation and a lack of growth. It's about finding that sweet spot, that dynamic balance between the two.
It sounds like a lifelong, balancing act. But I can see how that tension between chaos and order can be a source of both challenge and growth.
And this balance manifests itself not only in our individual lives, but also in the relationship between the individual and society.
So how does that play out on, a societal level?
Well, Peterson, he believes that individuals have responsibility to develop themselves and contribute to society. But at the same time, society has a responsibility to provide individuals with the opportunities and support they need to flourish. He criticizes ideologies that, pit the individual against the collective, arguing that we need both individual responsibility and social cohesion to thrive.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that we need each other to create a world where everyone can thrive.
Exactly. And this is where Peterson's emphasis on personal responsibility and striving for the highest good comes in. He challenges us to become, the best versions of ourselves, not just for our own benefit, but for the betterment of society as a whole.
It's a powerful message. It's about recognizing our own agency and using it to, make a positive impact on the world. This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I have a much better grasp of Peterson's core ideas and how they connect.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Peterson's work can be challenging at times, but it's also incredibly rewarding. He pushes us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and engage with the big questions that have haunted humanity for centuries.
And he ultimately leaves us with this sense of hope, a belief that even in the face of suffering and chaos, meaning is possible, that we have the power to create a better future, both for ourselves and for the world.
I think that's a message we all need to hear.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to continue exploring Peterson's work on your own. There's so much to discover, and his ideas can be applied in so many different areas of life. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving to become the best version of yourself.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.